I thought my big studio palette was my main setup, but over the last few months I've realised that I reach for this tiny plein air palette almost every time I paint. Today's video is going to be all about watercolour, which is a medium I've been really playing with in the last year. I set it up last year and I've been really enjoying just working out what I use and which colours work for me. So this is my big studio palette, which I keep at home, and this is my sort of new mini travel palette. These are my absolute essentials now and the paints that I use the most and that I grab the most. But I'll also talk you through my big palette. I still use this for specific shades and I'll walk you through the ones I use often, but I'll also tell you why my mini palette is so useful. Okay, so let's talk about my two palette system. So this is my studio palette. Now last year I began my watercolour journey and I painted this spread in this YouTube video, which I'll link in the cards and down below in the description. Now I was definitely a watercolour newbie. I'd been painting quite a few months and I definitely had built up a collection. You can see some of the clips here or the full video here on YouTube, but I definitely had quite a lot of colours and I learned a lot from that video and I had a lot of help from you guys sharing what you would add, and throughout the year I've definitely adjusted and taken things out and swapped things in depending on how useful they were. So this palette here, this larger one, and I will leave a link to it down below. I've just bought this and then I've filled it up myself. Some of the pans were bought as full pans, some were half pans that I've added using watercolour tubes. And this served me really well. It was very helpful for me to mix. I've definitely found that I've understood colour a lot more as I've been going through my watercolour journey. It wasn't a medium that I used at all before. I was very much a gouache based artist. So I've had a lot of fun playing around with this. You can see it's well loved. There are definitely colours here that are absolute staples. And then I created a small palette. So this is my plein air palette. So I made this because I wanted a lightweight setup. So I went to Japan on holiday back in March and I set this up then and curated the colours. And since then it's become a staple and I found myself using these colours and reaching for this palette all of the time. I'm really enjoying mixing them all to create enough shades for my landscape paintings, and I use this both plein air and at home. It's especially helpful for my quick loose watercolour art in my sketchbooks and not having to get this bigger one out. So we're going to start with the big palette. So let's put this aside. I'm going to share these colours at the end of the video. But I want to talk about this one first. So this is obviously where it all started. I didn't begin with all of these. I definitely added some in over time. But this has been so helpful in understanding what I actually use. So what's changed? Now let's just bring in my swatches from last year as well. And I'm also going to swatch as we go. Some of them I have just simply moved across. So there was a buff titanium in here, I've just moved that in here, and I think it would be helpful to have one in this too, so I don't have to keep swapping or have both open on my desk when I want to use my most used colours. So I think putting some of this buff titanium in a little palette and having that in here and like the shell pink, I think it would be helpful to have in both. But I haven't done that yet. I just want to talk you through my most used colours. You can definitely see there are some very well loved colours here that I could add in here, but we'll talk about why this is my essentials later on. Now this is pretty similar up here. I've got that beautiful Roman Szmal lavender and the Daniel Smith wisteria. They are gorgeous colours, really pretty shades, but again they're kind of just used in the spring and summer months when I want to paint some florals and add pops of colour. Now this was my most used blue. This one is Cassar Ultramarine. So I think Ultramarine is a really useful shade. I use this all the time in my gouache work, so it kind of makes sense that I use it with my watercolour work. So I'm going to swatch that one. And this one was also really helpful. This one is Daniel Smith Indigo. I absolutely love that shade. I think it's really helpful. But you'll see I've got another option in the other palette and I'll swatch that later. So let's start with these two blues. I'm just going to be swatching these in my Strathmore Mixed Media 500 series sketchbook, which is 100% cotton and perfect for all my mixed media work. So this is Cassar Ultramarine. I think it's the only Cassar one I've got, but I just think this is a beautifully rich blue and a beautiful mixing colour too. I really like using this for skies, but you'll see in my other one I do have a preference now, which isn't this one, so that's why this one didn't make it over to the plein air palette. Next up is Daniel Smith Indigo. I have a lot of Daniel Smith watercolours and I absolutely love them. They're probably my favourite brand, but I'm definitely not brand loyal and you'll see that as I swatch some more. So this one is a beautifully dark blue. It's definitely cool toned and I use this a lot for my shadow colours. I really like that you can add more water to bring it to a really soft grey. Okay, so those are my sort of cool and warm blues that I really like. And now we're moving on to the green section. Like I said, I do love some of these other colours, but they're just not used as often. Whereas my greens, because I am a nature and landscape based artist, I use them all the time. So this one is definitely a favourite and well loved. This one is Undersea Green by Daniel Smith. And then this one, which is another one that was very, very well loved. I'm coming to the pan here. This one is Moss Green by Sylvi's Watercolours. Then I have this one, which I mixed myself, which, I mean, there's not much left in here. That is an Ultramarine and Hansa Yellow medium mix. Okay, I have so many greens here. I also love this one. This one's Leaf Green by Holbein. And then these two, which I think are like my unsung heroes that I'd use basically every single landscape. So we have Nickel Azo Yellow by Szmal, and also Bismuth Yellow, also by Szmal. As well as Daniel Smith, I think Szmal's probably up there for me. I absolutely love the feeling of their watercolours and the pigmentation. Okay, I mean, it looks like I'm going to be swatching most of these because I have hit pan in a lot of them. But I do use greens a lot. I think they're really, really helpful. Obviously, you can mix your own greens, but I love convenience greens. And then I kind of mix them all together as I go. And that's also why my Bismuth Yellow is so dirty. Okay, so we're going to start with Undersea Green by Daniel Smith. So I really like this one. Hopefully you can see that's a very nice sort of warm but dark green. Most of my greens here are warm. I do have a cooler one in the other palette. The next one is Sylvi's Moss Green by Sylvi's Watercolour, which was kindly sent to me by Sylvi. She is based in Germany, and this is just a staple in this palette. It's a little bit lighter than the Undersea Green. It's definitely got a lot more yellow, but a really lovely base green. I really enjoy adding yellows to this and creating quite a lot of variation. So this next one I mixed myself following a recommendation from Liz Steele's blog. This one is Ultramarine and Hansa Yellow Medium. So I mixed this one. I didn't have many shades of greens. I mean, this one's kind of similar to the other two really, but I probably won't do this again because I've got so many greens, so I haven't mixed up a new one. But I think this one is a really lovely colour, and if you do have those two shades, then I definitely recommend mixing this up. Then we have Holbein Leaf Green. This is a really bright, just a convenience green really. I just love the vibrancy here. And I really like Holbein, so you can see the difference there. So much more yellow toned, but still a really, really lovely shade. Okay, onto my two Szmals. So we've got Bismuth Yellow, which, like I said, it's definitely dirty now, but this is the one that I use as my mixing cool yellow into all of the other ones. It's much more yellow toned than the Leaf Green. Definitely a cool yellow, reminds me of Chinese Green by Neocolor. And then the other one is Nickel Azo Yellow. So this one is definitely more of a dirty yellow. You can see there, it's got a bit more orange toned, kind of ochre-y almost. But again, I really like using that mixing in with my other greens. So that one's also Szmal. Okay, so that is many, many greens and yellows. The other ones that I use a lot are these three brown tones. So we'll move on to browns next. Okay, so first up is Daniel Smith Van Dyke Brown. This was recommended by you guys when I asked for suggestions for a cooler, darker brown in my palette. So it's definitely a cool brown, but a really lovely one for, again, mixing and also using with trees. It's kind of grey toned. I usually use more warmer browns, but I do find that one really helpful for mixing. Next up, another favourite is Burnt Sienna Light. This one is by Daniel Smith. So this one is much warmer than the Van Dyke Brown. Really lovely shade. I really like this brown tone. Definitely warm. You can really see the difference there. And then the other one that's been a staple in this palette is also Daniel Smith Raw Sienna. Now this one is pretty similar. It's definitely a bit more orange and yellow toned than the Burnt Sienna Light. So I probably didn't need both, but as you can see, still very well loved. You're also starting to see some of the colour shift here as it's drying, so you can see how that ultramarine is starting to show through in the Hansa Yellow Medium and Ultramarine mix, which I haven't got in the other ones. So really like that. I do find that the ones I usually use the most are the ones that aren't granulating or having that. I really like the pure colours, and I think that's probably just because of my use of gouache. And then I don't use these too often, so the next ones that I want to talk about that I use the most, and the last ones in this palette, are the Hansa Yellow Medium. Now I've got 2 of these in here because I do find it really helpful to have a sort of dirty and a clean. So you can see this one I use to mix greens, and this one I use when I'm mixing with oranges, just to try and keep them separate. So they're both Hansa Yellow Medium, a really lovely cool yellow, definitely mid-tone. Really love this one. It's like a butter yellow. I think this one's a staple. Then we've got New Gamboge. This one's by Daniel Smith. I love this one. I use this quite a lot when I'm painting like pastries or something. I find this a really helpful colour. A really lovely warm yellow shade. And then lastly, Pearl Orange by Daniel Smith, which is a shade that I didn't expect to use as much as I did, but really like that one. It's definitely not as orange as I thought. It's kind of like a very warm red, but definitely useful. Okay, so I still have a lot of similar greens here. You can tell I love my very yellow greens and my warm greens. But those are the ones that I found that I've used the most from this palette, and definitely ones I recommend. It was interesting, I didn't use many of the pinky tones, but you'll see which ones I've moved over to my other palette, and the same with all the different blues. And still many greens, which I do use, but I intermix them, so I definitely don't need them all. So let's move on to the unexpected winner, which is my plein air palette. So this mini palette, this limited selection actually made my work, I would say it made my work stronger and more intuitive, because I feel like I understand these colours a lot more, and so I mix up more shades. You can see I've got a dirty palette here, but I definitely feel like I understand it a bit better because I have limited my selection. Sometimes I think that's what we need, especially when we are heading outside and painting plein air or on location. So this is a really lightweight palette, and I think the portability is its strong point. This is the Roman Szmal Urban Sketches palette. I have it in blue. This is the packaging that it came in, but I swapped out most of these colours and I curated my own set. I do have a video about this palette as is up on my channel, so I'll leave that linked and in the description box. But like I said, I lifted these colours for my big palette when I was just setting this up before heading to Japan. You can watch that video and hear my decision making process over on a video on my Patreon. So I'm looking forward to swatching these and talking you through it, but I definitely feel like it reduces my decision fatigue having this palette. I don't really need a million of these different greens, just knowing that one is cool and one is warm. Warm is definitely my preference, so I do have 2 here, but I could easily swap one of them out. I've learned the mixes that I love the most, so making a soft grey and a shadow colour, and how to really use this little palette to its advantage. So this has accidentally become my true palette, because when I came back from Japan I didn't return the colours to the big one. I just kept it as it is, and I kept reaching for it and feeling like I had all I needed. So let me show you what colours I've got here. Let's start in the top left and work our way down. I've only got the one yellow here. Obviously I do love the Daniel Smith Hansa Yellow Medium, but this was the yellow I moved into this palette, and this is Holbein Permanent Yellow Light. I had both of these, the Hansa Yellow and this one, in my big palette, and it wasn't needed. I didn't need both of them. So just one of those yellows is perfect for me. Just a really nice warm yellow. Now I don't have a cool yellow in this set, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, because I think swapping out one of these greens for that cool yellow, so the by Smith yellow, I think would make this palette absolutely perfect. Next we have Shell Pink, which I don't think is super necessary, but I really like this colour. It's a convenience pink. It's very opaque because it does have white pigment in it, but I really like this, and it was super helpful in Japan for the cherry blossoms. I also found it really helpful for mixing up a lilac shade with the blue, which we're going to come on to, but just a really nice colour. I think this one is definitely one of my favourite pinks. I have 2 red/oranges in my palette. So the first one is Quinacridone Red by Daniel Smith. This is my cool red, and again, really helpful in Japan, but I think is a really good mixing colour. This one kind of comes out pink. It's definitely very cool and a lovely splash of colour, but like I said, I do tend to use this as mixing. So this one is like my warm red shade. It's definitely orange. This one is the Aquarius Orange. This was actually in the original Urban Sketching palette from Roman Szmal. Again, I don't ever use this on its own, but it is a really helpful mixing colour. Let's move on to the greens next. So first up we have a cool green. This is Winsor & Newton Perylene Green. Like I've said many times, I do mostly use warm greens in my landscapes, but I do think it's really helpful to have a cool and a warm green. You can see just how deep this one is, but really, really lovely. I think that's really helpful to have both, and definitely one that I've reached for more than I expected. Then we have two warm greens, and like I said, I think swapping one out for a different yellow would be much more useful for me, but these are the ones I have in my palette currently. So we have Autumn Green, which is beautiful. This one again came in the Szmal palette, and it's one that I've reached for a lot. It's such a lovely colour. It was recommended by a lot of you, and it has a lovely warm tone. It's just kind of like my perfect green, really. It's a bit darker than the leaf green, definitely a bit less yellow, but you can really see the difference there between the cool green on the left and this one here, which is the warmer green. So the other warm green I've got is Gold Green. This one is Daniel Smith, very similar really. There's a bit more of a shift with the Autumn Green. You'll see when it dries, it definitely goes a little bit more yellow toned. It's a bit smoother, I think. It doesn't have quite that granulation that the Autumn Green does have. This is kind of like my landscape essential. I can see why I have both in here, because this one is such a bright pop that I use all of the time, especially for fields and for a really bright summer green. Okay, onto my browns and my neutrals. So we have got Burnt Sienna Brownish, which again was from this set originally. This is by Szmal. This is kind of like an in-between. This one is darker than the Burnt Sienna Light by Daniel Smith, but a really, really nice warm toned brown. This one I really love mixing in with the Shadow Violet, which is also in this palette. I also have Holbein Yellow Ochre, another warm toned brown, but again I use this for mixing. I really like having the both there. Perhaps having a cooler toned brown would be more helpful, but like I said, I do mix this quite a lot with the colour that we're going to come on to. And then this one is Buff Titanium. This one obviously has a lot of white pigment in, so it is very opaque, but this has been a staple in my palette from day one. This one is by Schmincke. It's perfect for urban sketching. I use it for buildings, walls, and also paths, so definitely a staple in my palette that will come into every palette I own, I feel like. Just a perfect neutral for me. Okay, on to my very final two, so I've got two blues. One is my dark tone for this set, which is Shadow Violet by Szmal. This is the one that I've started using instead of the Indigo by Daniel Smith. I had both of these as options for this palette, but in the end I loved the drying shift with this one where you do get more of that violet tone coming through. It's just such a lovely colour. I'm really happy that this one came in the Urban palette set, because I'm not sure if I would have picked it up otherwise, but it's definitely become a staple. I use this a lot for mixing, like I said, with shadows, and just is a really helpful colour in my palette. And lastly in the set of 12 is Royal Blue by Sylvi. Now this one does remind me of the Ultramarine from Cast Art, that very first one I swatched. But this one is just such a nice blue. I went with this one for the set and I definitely don't regret it. I use this a lot for my skies. Again, I can also mix it in with some of my yellows, but mostly I use this pure for my blue skies in my work. It's a really nice clean blue. Okay, so this is how we're looking. I'm just going to show you some of my favourite mixes from my plein air palette. So you can definitely start to see some of these shifts here. So I'm going to pan over them in a minute so you can see the final dried colours and overview them both. But some of my favourite mixes are Buff Titanium and Shadow Violet. That creates this really nice grey, and I find that really helpful for doing buildings and urban sketching. So I can use the Shadow Violet on its own for some really lovely shadows, but for the building themselves I think this creates a really lovely neutral. I also really like Pyrrole Orange and Shadow Violet. I think because I don't use orange often, although I might mix that in with some of the greens, I think it's also really nice here for this slightly toned back brown. And then this one is Shell Pink and Sylvi Royal Blue, just to show you a really lovely soft purple. Okay, and there we go, there are all of my colours. So if I could only keep one palette, then I probably would go for this one, my plein air palette. It did make me realise how many colours I didn't need, and you know, I'm still going to absolutely use this, and I love to have those pops of colour like the lavender, the wisteria, but also I really love using the nickel azo yellow, and there's still a lot of colours in there I love, but for keeping things simple and making things a lot easier for me, I think this palette is definitely a winner, and I'm really happy I made this up for Japan so I could realise that, and just the power of mixing and understanding colour theory myself. So here are all the swatches. Like I said, I probably don't need both of these warm greens, but you can see a little bit here, and I'm going to pan over this entire page so you can see the final swatches. There is definitely more granulation there. You can definitely tell I like bright colours here, but I think being able to mix them together to create new shades is what makes watercolour so exciting, and also allows me to be looser in my work as I let things bleed into others and create new shades. So I'm happy with my selection. Like I said, I do wonder about adding in the by Smith yellow, maybe swapping the gold green, and I also don't have a cool brown, but like I said, I can kind of mix a bit of a cooler brown with the pearl orange and the shadow violet. It's definitely not as cool, but I could add a bit more shadow violet. But overall, really happy with this. I hope you found this video helpful. I still love using watercolours. I'm really happy that I explored that as a medium last year, and I'm going to continue playing and learning as I go for the rest of 2026. I'd love to hear what you think. I know I am still a watercolour newbie. I definitely don't pretend like I know everything. So please do share your thoughts with me in the comments, and I look forward to chatting with you all. A big thank you to my patrons for their support. Without them, I wouldn't be able to make these free YouTube videos every week, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll speak to you all next Sunday in my new YouTube video. See you later!